Hey, welcome everyone as you're coming in. We're so happy to have you here. We're going to start shortly. Just give some time to allow some folks to jump on. The question that I want you to answer in the chat is just where you coming from, what city, what state, what country you are joining us from, and that'll be great to see who's in the webinar thus far. There's about 27 people who've jumped on already, which is good, or 22 attendees, which is really good. All y'all early folks, we're so happy to see you. And just so happy that you've decided to take some time out to listen and get some really, really solid and good information on the real factors for the water crisis that's happening in Jackson. Some of y'all who are in attendance have had the opportunity to go with us, to go with the center to on a Southern Civil Rights Tour over the last couple of years, and I know all of you who've gone are very, very fond of Mr. Frank Figures, who's going to moderate for us this evening. But we're just really glad that you're here. And so as you're coming in, as you're tuning in, just let us know where you're tuning in from. And that, again, let us know who's in the room. Since this is in webinar format, we don't see anyone's faces. And so this is great. We got some folks from Minneapolis, from Boston, from California. This is really good. So as you're jumping in, please let us know where you're coming from. I see a lot of really good friends. Hey, Andy, so good that you're with us. Katie, so good to see you. Kelly Smith, oh my goodness. Thank you for joining us tonight. Mr. Figures, Kelly is one of the people who helped us to arrange the high school civil rights tour when we brought a bunch of high school students back in April. And so it's really good that that she's here, and they're taking another group of folks, I think, in March. So we'll be talking offline, Mr. Figures. But really, this is really great. So a lot of folks, obviously, from California, but it's really good to see folks coming from Minneapolis, from, let's see, where else did we say? Boston. So good to see y'all. So we'll give people maybe 2 more minutes. We will start relatively soon. I'll do a formal introduction. We are really, one of the things I want to let y'all know is that we're really, really fortunate this evening because, number one, it's a time difference. And so those of us who are on the West Coast, it's dinner time pretty much for us. It's 6 o'clock. But for those who are in Jackson, it's 8 o'clock. And then we have one of our panelists who's all the way in Geneva. And so it's 3 a.m. And that shows the commitment of those who are on the front lines, who are fighting, constantly fighting and staying strong, and for the civil rights of African Americans and of other marginalized groups. So it's really a huge, huge honor for them to be here. And you'll see who the panelists are, and they're doing outstanding, outstanding work locally in Jackson, in the state of Mississippi, in the country of the United States, and around the world. And you'll get a chance to hear some of that. And so we're just incredibly grateful for them. So yes, Kelly, it is so great to be able to hear from Mr. Figures again. And the thing that we always remember, Mr. Figures, is when you say 2 Mississippis. Like, I remember that from the very first time I met you back in 2017 when you gave us a tour of the lodge and told us the story of Jackson. And so I feel like we are kindred spirits. When I grow up, I want to be just like you. And so I'm going to go ahead and open this up in prayer, and then kind of have a very few opening remarks. Again, I want to respect the hour, the lateness of the hour for our panelists, and for those of you who are joining us from outside of California. And so let me pray, and then I'll get started with our introductions. Father, we just thank you that you are a God of justice. We thank you that that you're God for the marginalized, and that you come and you work on behalf of those who are most oppressed and most marginalized. Lord, we pray that you would help us to have open hearts, open minds, to hear about the history, the racial history of this country, the racial history of the state of Mississippi, and the current racial history of the city of Jackson, which is a city that we dearly love and we know that you love. So, Father, please be with us, be with the speakers, help them to continue to speak with clarity, with boldness, and to inspire us to want to join them in the fight and in the freedom struggle in Jackson, Mississippi. We pray all these things in your name. Amen. Well, welcome, folks. I am John Williams, for those of you who do not know me. I am the director for the Fellowship Center for Racial Reconciliation. And once again, we are just so honored and humbled to be able to bring this event to you this evening, this wonderful opportunity to have a panel discussion and to learn more about the fight, the freedom struggle in the state of Mississippi and in the city of Jackson. For those of you who have not been on one of our Southern Civil Rights tours, we've had the good fortune over the years to develop really strong and great relationships with folks from Jackson, Mississippi, and one person in particular who really we consider a part of the Center for Racial Reconciliation, and that's Mr. Frank Figures. And we just consider this evening just incredibly important because oftentimes when those of us who are not in the epicenter of a fight, the epicenter of a struggle, we don't always get the true narrative. Oftentimes we get the narrative that's been given to us through various mediums, and that's just incredibly unfortunate, because then we draw conclusions and we decide not to help. The other thing that's really important about this evening, I want to read a quote from Jean Theoharis, who is an author, who's a scholar, is a great thinker, and writes a lot about the history of resistance all across this wonderful country. And she talks about the importance of the need to start the story earlier. So often when we think about freedom struggles, whether it's the civil rights movement, whether it's the fight to end slavery, whether it's the fight to end Jim Crow, we often start at the end, and we need to start at the beginning. And so we need to start the story earlier. The crisis that happened in Jackson, Mississippi, and that is currently going on in Jackson, Mississippi, didn't just happen or didn't just come about this summer. It's something that's been going on and on for decades. There's been a huge fight and battle, and I've been incredibly fortunate to have conversations with Mr. Figures, who's been able to teach me and let me know about the battle for the city of Jackson. And so, so it's really important for us to understand that we have to start the story from the real beginning. We have to start there. And our wonderful panelists, who he will introduce, will tell us that story. And then, you know, it's just again, we're just really honored that you're here. We're honored that that they are here. And I will stop talking. I will turn it over to Mr. Figures, and he will take over. He will be our moderator for the evening. If you can just hit the reaction button and just kind of give him claps or just thank him in the webinar chat, please go ahead and do that. Mr. Figures, take it over.
Thank you, Pastor Williams, and it is an honor and a joy to be in you all's presence. And I really appreciate, and the citizens of Jackson and the state of Mississippi, really thank you all for wanting to know what's really going on. Last week, I was honored to hear and see the sermon that was delivered by Pastor Albert Tate from the first Sunday of Advent, November the 27th, 2022. Pastor Tate shared with us about love, that God is, the light that Jesus brought to the world, the tree that Jesus hung, bled, and died on, and the hope that is a part of all of our existence. He unpacked one of the season's most popular songs, and that was "O Holy Night." The song had been covered by most of the popular singers of today in every musical genre. It's on almost everybody's Christmas album playlist. The song "O Holy Night" began in France in the early 1800s as a poem for school children that was later banned in the country of France and elsewhere about Europe and the United States because of its abolitionist underpinnings. The song "O Holy Night" announces the birth of Jesus, but it also announces what Jesus was born to do. In one of the verses, it said, "Truly, he taught us to love one another. His law is love, his gospel is peace. Chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother. And in his name, all oppression shall cease. Let all that is within us praise his holy name." Pastor Tate reminded us of the weary world can rejoice because of the thrill of hope. That thrill, that substance of hope is what moves us in our work or our struggle to make two Mississippis one Mississippi. The thrill of hope is what motivates and inspires us to work for a better life and a fair deal for this weary world. When Pastor John Morgan Williams brings people to Jackson and spends a few minutes with us at the M.W. Stringer Grand Lodge of Prince Hall Affiliate Masons, we try to share stories from inside out by having actual participants from 5 stages of development of the Mississippi Theater of the Civil Rights Movement. We began with the Freedom Riders of 1961, and Freedom Riders in Mississippi were given the chance to become Freedom Workers, which is the second phase. And the Freedom Workers were dispatched in various communities around the state of Mississippi, not to be leaders, but to assist leaders. And the Freedom Workers in 2 years developed over 120,000 freedom fighters. Freedom fighters because these were the people who risked their life, their safety, their limb, their livelihood in order to attempt to register to vote. And these freedom fighters and freedom workers and one-time freedom riders looked at the best practices of what brought them there and decided to form a freedom party, the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. Now, Pastor Williams urges us in the lodge, in that setting, to talk about the struggle that continues. In the struggle that continues, we fulfill that charge from Pastor Williams by bringing in the staff and administrative personnel of One Voice to talk about the work that's going on now. Sometimes we bring in the Mississippi Black Leadership Institute participants, and sometimes the Hollis Watkins Muhammad internship program participants. But tonight we are honored to have a panel of actual participants in the struggle for one Mississippi. In this order, they will present themselves to you and the story of the water crisis. Derrick Johnson, who is the National NAACP President and Chief Operating Officer, who lives in Jackson and studied and matriculated at Tougaloo College. While at Tougaloo College, Mr. Johnson was also served as the state NAACP Youth and College Division President, and later went on to become the City of Jackson City Branch NAACP President, and then the Mississippi State Conference President. And while Mississippi State Conference President, became a member of the National NAACP Board of Directors, and now is National President and CEO of the NAACP. Following him will be Miss Rukia Lumumba, raised in Jackson and also a Tougaloo alum. And while at Tougaloo, she was Miss Tougaloo College. Miss Lumumba is the founder of the People's Advocacy Institute and active in the coalition called Rapid Response Coalition, the collaboration that works on the ground every day, even today. Even though she's someplace else, that coalition is working today to see to it that people have water, whether by pickup or delivery. Following her will be Miss Nashombe Lambright. Miss Lambright Haynes is a Tougaloo College alum, a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and formerly the executive director of the Mississippi American Civil Liberties Union, and now serves as the executive director of One Voice. And as the executive director of One Voice, she is tasked with the responsibility of keeping me in tow, as well as the nearly 30 plus staff, interns, and consultants of One Voice, as well as the other bodies of work of One Voice, like, for instance, education, environmental justice, economic justice, criminal justice, public policy, civic engagement. With Mrs. Haynes, One Voice not only has a statewide footprint, but also a regional footprint. Following her will be Mr. Charles Taylor. Now, Mr. Charles Taylor didn't matriculate at Tougaloo College, but just like Stacey Abrams of Georgia, his mother and father did. Mr. Taylor is a lifelong resident of Jackson, Mississippi, and a Morehouse College alum. Mr. Taylor is a data scientist and founder and executive director of Payton Strategies. He's also the statistician for the National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated. Mr. Charles Vernon Taylor is the executive director of the Mississippi State Conference NAACP, and he will share with us the road ahead in the continuing struggle to make two Mississippis, one Mississippi. The thrill of hope coming from Mr. Charles Vernon Taylor. In that order, if Mr. Johnson is on the line, if not, Ms. Lumumba.
Good evening,
Okay, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. I'll take up some time as we await on Mr. Johnson. Thank you so much, Mr. Figures. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you to the Center for Racial Reconciliation and to everyone who joined today. Thank you for your time, for your listening ear, and for caring about what's happening in Jackson, for caring about us as a people and a place. My name is Rukia Lumumba, as Mr. Figures said. Mr. Figures is someone that we all dearly love and respect deeply, and appreciate all the years of work and continued work that he does to lead and guide us in this movement for social change and justice. So I am the executive director of the People's Advocacy Institute, which is rooted in Mississippi. We are an organization that focuses on transformational justice, and we do that by incubating various projects and initiatives. And so one of the projects that we've incubated is called the Mississippi Rapid Response Coalition. And we started the Mississippi Rapid Response Coalition in 2020 in direct response to the COVID-19 pandemic and shutdown. And since that time, we've responded to crises caused by climate change and failing infrastructure across the state of Mississippi, including Hurricane Ida and the winter storm of 2021. The coalition is led by, again, the People's Advocacy Institute, which I have the beauty of working with, the Mississippi Poor People's Campaign, One Voice Mississippi Jackson People's Assembly, the Immigrant Alliance for Justice and Equity, Alternate Roots, the Mississippi Moves, Operation Good, Strong Arms of Mississippi, Mississippi Black Women's Roundtable, Southern Poverty Law Center, and over 30 partner organizations. The organizations that I just mentioned now are those that have been really core in helping to move this water distribution on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's important to say their names because every day we've been on the phone at 8 a.m. every morning, up until literally about 3 weeks ago, which we now meet every other day. So 3 times a week instead of daily. And we're still giving out water. And so while I'm here with the opportunity in Geneva, Switzerland at the United Nations Permanent Forum on Racism, I'm here talking about the water crisis in Jackson, but there are people on the ground. Our ground team is there distributing water, and not just water, but also distributing water filters and water tests. We want our people to not just have clean water, but also to become the water technicians that can ensure that water remains clean moving forward. And so I'm very thankful for the opportunity to be here. And I think I'll stop. Yes, Mr. Figures, or just an introduction? Okay.
No, you can go on and talk in depth about your work.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. So we've been engaging in this work since the water crisis began on since August 29th, we've been distributing water daily. We started distributing water every day, expanding the city's efforts by including 6 additional sites for distribution. Since our time together as a coalition, and I want to make it clear that the water crisis and the water response, let me be clear, the water response has been one in which has been led by residents. It's the residents of Jackson that I truly say have been the true heroes. And those organizations, like those that you see on here, One Voice, NAACP, People's Advocacy Institute, coming together and responding to our immediate needs as residents. Because as you see us all on here right now, you'll get a chance to see us and talk to us. But all of us are also impacted people. We're also the people that have to deal with the water ourselves. We have to find water to drink, to brush our teeth with. When our water pressure is low, how are we going to wash and bathe, right? And so as we are navigating our own homes, we're also responding to the needs of our neighbors. And I can truly say that I am so proud of Jackson residents. I'm so proud of us because every single time there has been an issue that is related to any crisis, whether it's the water crisis that we experienced last year in 2021, where we were without water for nearly 6 weeks, many community members without water for nearly 6 weeks because 130 pipes broke across the city. Whether it is that incident where community members were out and about, the Rapid Response Coalition was out and about 2 days after the ice storm took effect. Or if it's what we see happening now, where we know that this is going to be a long and protracted struggle, where we're going to have to rebuild. We're demanding the rebuild of our entire water system. What we know is that it's been our residents that have actually taken up the brunt of the work to ensure that we are able to meet each other's needs. And we've done that in many ways. I've talked about distributing water daily, door to door. I've talked about water filters. One of the ways that we also do that is through what we call wellness checks, where we call and do canvassing, door-to-door canvassing to check on folks to see what has your experience been with the water. What has your experience been and what are your needs, most importantly? And so being able to respond to folks' needs. As we continue to move forward, we want to make sure that the city of Jackson and the EPA and the DOJ understand that residents need to be a part of the actual development of this water infrastructure as it's being rebuilt. We don't want to just be folks who receive support after the fact, who get the plan after the fact. We want to be a part of the plan's development. We want to participate and participate in what we call participatory processes, research and design. It's our right, and we believe that we have the capacity as folks who are going to have to live with it, as we've been living with it for decades. We want to live with something better. And we're really pushing for something that is not a water system that is one that resembles something like a 1990 water system. We want to see something that brings us into the 21st century, right? And so we're asking for your continued support to help push our state to not give us, little bits of funding here and there, but to fully fund the rebuild of our water infrastructure system. In 2021, we had over 225 days of boil water notices. This year alone, we're already close to reaching that number. And it's time that we really see something different. And what we're experiencing in Jackson, I know that many people across the nation have experienced, and even many people in Mississippi. There are still other communities in Mississippi that have not received the care, the infrastructure care, that has experienced the neglect that we have also experienced in Jackson because of a failure to recognize the importance of our infrastructure and maintaining it. But not only just a failure to recognize that, but a willful disregard for the people of particular places where we often find, as we talked about in the prayer that was given today, that those of us that are most vulnerable, those of us that are living in economic dire situations, living in poverty, those of us that are forced to continue to bear the oppressive brunt of a people that have been sick, of some folks who have been sick with what we call a disease of racism. And so that has caused us to have funds taken from us or not given to us as a result of our conditions and our positions in Jackson as a city that is predominantly Black, over 85% Black. Mr. Figures is here on this call, and he can give you a history probably better than any of us. But we know that since the 1970s, we began to see white flight, but more importantly, we began in 1997 to see a decrease in funding for our water and sewer infrastructure across the city. And we continue to see that decrease throughout the years. And so now we're demanding that our state fully fund the rebuild of our water and sewer infrastructure system. And as we also ask for federal dollars to come directly to our municipality, to our city, we know that it's going to take all of us to be engaged fully in the process to see the system that we deserve. And we're hopeful that Jackson will become an example of what so many communities across the nation can do when we pull together and we have the support of folks like you on this call and folks globally that can help us push our state to do the right thing. So I really want to say thank you. We need water, and I'm going to be quiet because we don't have much time. And Charles has been doing great work, and Nashambi has been doing great work, and I want to make sure that I give time for them to share.
Mrs. Haynes.
Okay, are you ready for me, Mr. Figures?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. All right. So I heard Rakia's presentation, and so I'll just try to pick up where she left off. She basically covered the work that we're supporting as a part of the Rapid Response Coalition. And so I'll just add a little bit to that. I'm a lifelong Jackson resident. And so, the water crisis hasn't been anything new To me, I can remember as early as my high school days, getting the boil water notices at my residence. And I remember, the winter storms, we would be out of school for, several days, when the pipes would freeze up and we would be without water. And so, I remember those times growing up, and always knew that Jackson had a water problem, although I just didn't know how severe it was until I got older. But of course, as I got older, I started realizing that we had always been putting a Band-Aid on the problem that was eventually going to have to be addressed. And so, as Rakia said, we've been working to make sure that Jacksonians have access to clean water while this issue is being addressed, while at the same time addressing these, greater systemic concerns about holding the state accountable for denying the city access to funds for so many years, which is the reason why we find ourselves in this place right now. It's not by accident that Jackson has found itself in a crisis right now with roads and water infrastructure problems. Many administrations that go beyond Mayor Lumumba have requested funds to fix Jackson's water infrastructure. And those requests have gone without granting them their requests. So we're working, to hold the state accountable, while at the same time keeping citizens informed about the status of the repairs, while keeping citizens with safe and clean water, and making sure that families have access to clean water. And I think that Rakia also talked about the water filters, and making sure that families have access to the filters, both in their kitchens and bathrooms, to make sure that, we have access to, clean water, both to drink, wash dishes, bathe, and brush teeth. And that is also one of our demands from EPA. And so I feel like I'm repeating some of the things that Rakia has already said. And so I'll stop there to let the next person talk.
Thank you, Ms. Haynes. I don't think Mr. Johnson is on yet. He's in a retreat in someplace that's not known to me. But one of the exciting things that we have going for us is Mr. Charles Taylor. Mr. Charles Taylor, in addition to the things that I aforementioned, he's also a consultant with One Voice. He's a lifelong resident of Jackson, and he has also brought to Jackson a well concept that people can install in the sky that delivers pure drinking water to people. But beyond that, his specialty is in the statistics, the numbers, the data of Mississippi. And in a time certain, as he puts it sometime, we can see why the public schools are under attack, the infrastructure, the roads and bridges, the airport, the water, and everything else that citizens are a part of is under attack and trying to be privatized by the state of Mississippi. So he has some exciting information about what is happening in Mississippi in anticipation of what the future is going to hold. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Figures, and also to the center. Thank you for having me. You know, I'm delighted to be here. Anytime I get to be with Rekia Lumumba and Nashawn Lambright Haynes and Frank Figures is a great day for me. And I just appreciate their support, their leadership, not only in Jackson and in Mississippi, but as you know, with Rekia being in Geneva and Nashawn being in Washington, their leadership throughout this country and world. You know, I wanted to talk about a few things in thinking about this in the concept of Mr. Figures saying the thrill of hope. But as we talk about the thrill of hope, I'm also, you know, thinking about it in the context of, you know, the work that we do being born out of need. And so, you know, if you think about it, NAACP has been around for over 100 years, you know, nationally since 1909, but also in Mississippi since 1918. We've had a presence of the NAACP with the Vicksburg branch of, you know, if you're familiar with Mississippi, this is, you know, about 45 minutes west of Jackson, being our first charter branch. But even before that, you know, One Voice and NAACP office sits at the M.W. Stringer Lodge. And so, you know, as many of you have taken the tour in the lodge and had the privilege of doing so with Mr. Figures, you know, he's told you that Ida B. Wells, went to the Niagara movement. It was the M.W. Stringer Lodge who sponsored her to go to the Niagara movement to represent the state of Mississippi. And so, you know, as we think about, you know, what that moment may have looked like for the NAACP in 1909, where there was a moment of need to figure out, you know, how can we really address this issue of race in this context, where they were just a few decades after Emancipation Proclamation. And then you fast forward a century later, you have One Voice, which is our sister organization, being birthed out of need of Hurricane Katrina. And, you know, a decade and a half later, you know, One Voice is a pillar that is deeply rooted in the Mississippi community, as well as the work that Rekia is doing with People Advocacy Institute, and also the Mississippi Rapid Response Coalition, which, as she mentioned, was birthed out of the 2019 ice rage, which was one of the largest ice, I think it was the largest ice rage in the history of this country. Unfortunately, many times in Mississippi, you know, we can boast that we have the largest of the worst, and consequently, you know, we can have the least of the best. But that is true in all instances, many instances, except for our people. You know, the folks of Jackson are resilient and they're proud. And that's one of the points I wanted to talk about first, is the resiliency, the innovation, you know, as Nashawn and Mr. Figures and Rekia have painted the scene for you of what's happening in Jackson. A couple of things. You also have this innovative technology that's here, where we partner with Source Water. And Source basically takes, they take solar panels that it can actually produce water, and they can, you know, put them on site, whether it's at your home or your office or a large facility, et cetera. And so literally from the atmosphere, these panels that are solar powered will generate water. And then, you know, you have clean drinking water, you know, alternative supply. So you think about this kind of in an emergency context, as this issue in Jackson is over $1 billion issue, and it expands several decades, several administrations, and many of those administrations have asked for help. But with that being said, you know, that is something that we've been looking into, and folks, they've been supporting. The other thing is the West Foundation. You know, they basically have a similar situation, I've done a lot of work in Flint, Michigan, but it's, atmosphere water generation, but they're able to do it on a much larger scale. So you think about, somewhere like those big potable water tanks, being able to generate, I want to say 5,000 gallons of water a day is what that's been able to do. So as we think about this innovation and resiliency, we also are doing all this in the background of a crisis. And so, as we know, in Mandarin, the character for crisis and the character for opportunity is the same character. And I think about the Jackson water crisis in that way. You have a scenario where we woke up and it seemed like it was just Tuesday, but the world woke up and saw that Jackson was in a water crisis. And we appreciate the support that we've been getting across the nation and across the world. I'll tell you, NAACP, did a little bit of water delivery during the crisis, far less than the efforts of the Mississippi Rapid Response Coalition. In many ways, the Mississippi Rapid Response Coalition served as an epicenter for water distribution from a community level. But when the NAACP, we did with our partners, we decided to distribute water direct to homes, and we were able to do so for about 100 pallets. And I'll tell you, the image that is ingrained in my head and will be, I believe, for the rest of my life, is these two young children on the porch as we are driving through a neighborhood with a U-Haul, and we passing out water. And you can tell from what sits on the porch that they were living there with their elderly grandparent. And, they're yelling out, we need water, we need water, we need water. And, it really resonated to me for a few reasons. One, recognize that it is the magnitude of this issue, how special water is, drinking water is, but also the magnitude of just delivering water. So, for us, it was a long day, but we never made it anywhere out of the eye shot of our offices. And, you think about it in that context. And so, with those two children sitting on the porch, I was happy to be able to provide water to them, but it really hit home for me to say, this is an issue that is multifaceted, it is complex. Is not just about water distribution. We need to make sure that we come up with a long-term solution to this long-term problem that we had in the city. And so, the NAACP filed a complaint. NAACP National, along with the Mississippi State Conference and the Jackson City branch, filed a complaint to the EPA and said that when you think about water and this issue, we're in the city of Jackson, and the city of Jackson is situated in the state of Mississippi. In the last 25 years, there's only been 3 times that the request of Jackson was actually given, or the request was granted for the state to support the city of Jackson in terms of its water infrastructure. 3 times in the last 25 years. If you look at recent legislative sessions, there's several bills year after year after year are filed, but also fail in the Republican-led legislature for Jackson to get relief from its water system. Even in 2020, when you had a scenario where the Republican-led legislators finally said, you know what, we're going to give something to this Jackson water crisis, something to the Jackson infrastructure, and it was ultimately vetoed by our Republican governor. The question for me then was, is Jackson not in the state of Mississippi? Is Jackson not the largest city in the state of Mississippi? What is unique about Jackson? Because there was relief given to the suburban areas of Jackson. There was support given across certain parts of the state. Well, what is different about Jackson? Well, here's what's different. Jackson is an 80% African-American city. And so, it is our belief, because of that, we've seen gross negligence on as a state, as an actor in this situation. But the thing that brings me this kind of thrill of hope is a couple of things, kind of transitioning to just give context to Mississippi and its political context, because the infrastructure in Jackson, if it is probably one of the most political things that you're going to see in the state of Mississippi. But here it is. There are two political powers that continue to grow in Mississippi in this new context, and that is the Republican Party, and that's also black political power. These in many ways it's a juxtaposition of each other, but it is the two things that grow. Every election cycle, there is a significant increase, somewhere between 10 to 14% of the number of African Americans to get elected to office, and this happens year after year, and it has happened since we've had the first African American to be elected in Mississippi since Reconstruction. We've been on a positive linear trajectory in terms of Black power and Black folks getting elected to office since then. But, the question you may have is, if that is the case, if Mississippi is a state that has more Black elected officials than any other state in the country, if Jackson is a city that has a Black mayor and has had several Black mayors before, why is it that we have these problems? Because we're still situated in the background of a Republican-led state that has done everything it can to cut off his nose to spite his face, especially when it comes to race relations, when it comes to supporting people in Mississippi that looks like me and Mr. Figures. And so with that, the reason why I have hope is because what I can foresee that is in the horizon is our Fokker moment. And this Fokker moment will be the tipping point. Mississippi will be a majority Black city, majority Black state in many of our lifetimes. And so it is the work that we continue to do. It's the work that One Voice does around civic engagement and civic engagement infrastructure to be able to support, to make sure that ultimately we can build power. And I simply define power as the ability to make a decision. And so, when that day comes, you will have those who are most vulnerable and marginalized in Mississippi to be able to make decisions upon their own lives, where you won't have a counterbalance the same way that can say ultimately, no, this is not the case. So with that being said, I love being from Mississippi. I love being from Jackson. We are resilient people. We are solution-oriented people, and we are folks who are fighting every single day to make sure that those little children, like I saw on the porch, or their voices can be heard and their needs can be met. And so, with that, Mr. Figures, it is an honor. Thank you so much for allowing me to share a few words, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor, Mrs. Haynes, and Ms. Lumumba. I don't know whether Derek Johnson is on yet or not. He's a busy guy. There are two questions out there in the queue, and one is the citizens. Why is it? I think it reads, "Why is it the citizens' responsibility to provide for their own water?" And then another one says, the governor blames Jackson. And then there's another one, how has the federal government responded with the funding? Mr. Taylor said to that one that the citizens of Jackson through the NAACP, both the Jackson City branch, the state conference, and the national NAACP petitioned or challenged or filed suit with the federal government that went, it was Title VI, that went to the EPA. And now that leaves us in a better position. Now the suit was about discrimination. Why? Out of those 25 times that the state government only provided for the citizens of Jackson 3 times. And so Mrs. Haynes and Ms. Lumumba and Mr. Taylor said that what we want in Jackson now is a direct appropriation so that we can provide for ourselves. Now, here's the position of the state of Mississippi, folks. The state of Mississippi the citizens of Jackson will vote to increase their taxes, will vote to tax themselves. But the state of Mississippi will set up a special governance committee to oversee the taxes that we vote to pay to increase, and then determine how the tax is going to be spent, specifically where. So in one, the Capital Improvement District got good streets and fairly good infrastructure, but the rest of the city of Jackson is suffering with potholes and not good infrastructure. And let me just say this, Ms. Lumumba, before you come. Also, most people don't know that the state of Mississippi from 1865 to 1940, the majority voting age population in Mississippi were of Black folk. And in that majority, until 1965, until the federal government stepped in and gave an affirmative right to vote with the Voting Rights Act of 1965, it was only then that the citizens of Jackson got an affirmative right to vote. From 1865 to 1940, when we were the majority, no right to vote. And that's what the struggle to make 2 Mississippis, 1 Mississippi was about, the right to vote to better improve ourselves. Ms. Lumumba.
Thanks, Mr. Figgins. I mean, I think you said it. I think you said it all. I'll just add that I do think that the lawsuit filed by the NAACP was really a game changer, and it's been critical to our ability to see some wins. The other piece is, I see a question asked around, how has city political leadership played a part in the coalition? And I'll just say that city leadership has been intricately involved, we've actually expanded what their reach. So prior to the flooding at the end of August, what we saw was, the city had been trying with limited staff to distribute water every day, 7 days a week to residents, and just weren't able to reach as many people. And so that's when the coalition stepped in to offer additional sites. And so the city has been with us every step of the way. The coalition also donated a staff member to the 311 departments where we have additional staffing in there to respond to folks' water needs. The other part of that question is the water crisis looked at as an example of Black reparations. It's so funny that you mentioned that right now, because I'm here at the permanent convening on racism and people of African descent, specifically where they're convening about reparations. And I came here to support one of our team members who does violence intervention work, as he was presenting on how the case of criminalizing Blackness actually is a case of also something for us to think about reparations around. And as a result, was asked to talk about also the water crisis. And so, that is something that I think that we must talk about, and not just talk about in terms of Jackson, but when we're talking about infrastructure and the willful neglect of Black-led communities and Black-led cities, the willful neglect by state agencies to deprive us of the resources that we need, when it has been our bodies, our ancestors' bodies that actually helped to build the infrastructure that currently exists. And then we were forced to not only do that labor, but then in order to have access to it, we got to pay for it, right? We have to pay money towards that. And so when we think about all of the ways that we've been impacted, where we've been contributors, but also those that have been exploited, right? And so, yes, I mean, I think that's something for us to consider, reparations and or restitution. Lastly, what I wanted to just highlight, in addition to the lawsuit, is that Jackson residents, as Mr. Figures has said, literally have done everything that they can to ensure that we have clean water, including taxing themselves 1% at one point in time, just to help offer some additional funds towards our water infrastructure issues. And so we definitely are not a people that have sat by and waited on somebody to move. I think here in Mississippi, we've always been ones that recognize that if we're gonna see action, we're gonna have to take action ourselves. And the people of Jackson have been doing that. So thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Taylor, you have any additional?
I'm gonna attempt to answer something, and I'm not an expert on Flint, Michigan, but one of the questions I think Sarah asked was talking about differences and similarities between the Flint water crisis and the Jackson water crisis. Of course, the Flint water crisis had a lot to do with lead being in the water, because they went from one water supply that was more acidic. And so basically when that water went through the pipes, it kind of eroded. And so you have a lot of folks, a lot of homes have basically have to be, the piping in their homes have to be replaced because of the high acidity levels of the water when they change the water supplies. So Jackson, for us, the difference is not necessarily a change in water supply, but what it is a neglect on the water infrastructure. So in some instances, the water infrastructure in Jackson, it ranges from anywhere from 70 to 100 years old. And so it's a scenario where the city of Jackson, when I was growing up, and at its height had somewhere between 225, maybe even 250,000 residents. City of Jackson now, as of last census, has about 150 residents and has lost 25,000 residents from the last census. So it went from 174 to about 20,000 people or so. It was like 155 or so. But what ends up happening in that kind of scenario, and it's not just our water, is a lot of our infrastructure, school district, same situation. You have a city that was built for 250,000 people, now only 150,000, and that 100 or so thousand who left the city, or 75,000 left the city, went to the suburbs, still work in the city, went into the suburbs, took the tax base to the suburbs. And so you have a scenario where the suburbs are parasites to the city of Jackson, but you don't have, but then you have the state that does everything it can to stifle the city and you have these thriving suburbs, but they only are thriving because they are sucking the life out of the city. And if you look at downtown Jackson, many of the buildings are either state, federal, or local government. So you're not paying taxes. You know, you have all these different scenarios where state is eliminating different taxes and creating all these incentives, et cetera. So it's difficult for the city to be in a place, but it still has to serve an infrastructure with a fleeting tax base. But then, even as Mr. Figures and Rakia alluded to or mentioned, you have a scenario we had a 1% sales tax. We did a 1% sales tax when the late Chokwe Lumumba Sr. was in office, and residents voted for it. I want to say almost 90% of Jackson residents voted for it. And then the state went back and said, oh, well, since y'all voted to tax yourselves, and this might actually provide some relief, we're going to take just about every half of the stuff that you actually could have a 1% sales tax on, and we're going to take it out of the bill. So we're going to create a commission that says that, you know, you can't even have the governing power to say how those 1% sales tax dollars get paid on infrastructure. Oh, and by the way, even the reason why they came up with the 1% sales tax was a legislative remedy so that you wouldn't have toll booths outside the suburbs, which is what we need, because you have folks, if you look in Jackson in the morning, everybody's coming in, everybody's coming out. So any other context in New York City is toll booths all over the place because of this same thing. But our legislature said we couldn't do that. So in every instance, you've had a situation where the state as an actor has said, we want to stifle Jackson. We want to stifle the growth of Jackson, so much so, even if it stifles the growth of Mississippi, we don't care. We don't want this Black city to thrive. And so saying that to say, that's just some of the context nuance between what is happening in Flint and a little more on what's happening in Jackson from a structural standpoint.
Mrs. Haynes, any additional comments? Ms. Lumumba?
I think Charles laid it out for us very clearly, right, in plain language. The only thing I'll add is that, someone raised the question around, are our efforts sustainable as residents, as community members that have taken on this task? And I would say they're not as sustainable as a city, as a state government. So no, I think that our efforts are definitely admirable, but we expect that the state and the federal government will come in and provide the resources that are necessary. It is our right. It is our right to have clean water. It is our right to have an infrastructure that can support the provisions of clean water to its people. And so, absolutely. We expect to receive that. And then, the only other thing is that, someone raised a question around resources allocated from the federal government for Mississippi. So yes, there has been, the federal government through, different infrastructure bills. White House has indicated that they intended for certain money to come to Jackson. As money has been flowing through the state, we've seen our legislator create barriers to our obtaining those full amounts, creating different rules that require us to only be allowed to access certain portions of that money, requiring us to also have matching dollars. The other thing is that I just want to be clear, the EPA has been working with the city and has been open to community input. But the EPA in other places has also been able to provide filters, has been able to provide additional water support, and has been able to provide some relief. So as every day Jackson, the city of Jackson, through taxpayer dollars is paying EPA fines for our poor water system, those funds should be funneled back into our community to actually provide us some immediate relief. And so we're looking for the EPA to actually provide us with some immediate relief, such as water filters and things like that, that can help sustain us until we see a new water system built.
So let me just drop this in, just as a matter of history. The right to vote, why people's vote matter. In 1959, the people of Hinds, Madison, and Rankin County, which includes the city of Jackson, voted to build a reservoir, a man-made lake. And the man-made lake covers 53 square miles of water. By 1961, they created, while they were in the process of digging this structure that was going to be a 58 square mile body of water, they created the Pearl River Valley Water Supply District. This Pearl River Valley Water Supply District had three functions. It was created to do three things. One, to manage the recreational aspects of this Pearl River Reservoir that was going to be built, the fishing and the hunting and the water skiing and all of that. Two, to manage the 17,000 acres of property around this body of water, which today some of the most expensive structures exist. It may be one of the largest land banks in the country, where people can build on it, but they don't own the land, they just own the building, and they pay a perpetual lease on the land to the Pearl River Valley Water Supply District. But the third thing the supply district was created to do was to provide the citizens of Jackson clean, clear, safe drinking water. Now that was in 1959. And from 1959 until today, the Pearl River Valley Water Supply District has not fulfilled that to the citizens of Jackson. The citizens of Jackson and weren't voting, but everybody was paying taxes. 40% of the people in Hinds County couldn't vote, were not allowed to vote, but they collected taxes which were used to build this body of water, but no vote. And today we don't get any benefit off of that water supply area. And Pastor Tate, I'm sure he has people in his family that were impacted in the 50s when they built this body of water, because he speaks often that he's Sister Connie's boy, and Sister Connie's people have been in that area for 100 years, and he come from a family of activists. So you just have to see where we are. But we, as everybody has agreed, we're on the move, and in a time certain, and that's what all of the fight has been, to prevent the time certain, to demonstrate that we are inept, to demonstrate that we are irresponsible, to demonstrate that we can't govern. The same narrative that went forth out of the failure of Reconstruction. But we can do this and we will do it. And I just love when Mr. Taylor says, at a time certain, that we will be doing this. And on the ground, Ms. Lumumba, Ms. Haynes, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Taylor, and the rest of the all of the people that are working are doing this work so that when a time certain comes, everybody can be filled with the thrill of hope, this whole weary world. And I don't know how much more time we got. People, I think, are dropping off.
We're good on time. I wanna ask
Mhm.
this question that's been kind of, as I'm listening to each of the wonderful presenters, and part of the reason for this event is definitely what you're giving us, but what are some practical ways that we as attendees can support you in your work, you each individually, and how can we support the city of Jackson?
So I am dropping some little tips into the chat. Sorry, second. I'll just drop this and but folks can also go to MSRRC.org, which is Mississippi Rapid Response Coalition. If you go to Jackson People's Assembly, it also will take you there. .org as well. And these are ways. One way is that please just stay up to date with what's happening. You know, follow the Assembly, follow the NAACP, follow the City of Jackson website. Share what you see. It is really important that you share what you see. The other piece is that we have an assembly coming up on December 13th, which is next Tuesday. It'll be in person, but we also will likely have a virtual option. And I will confirm that by tomorrow. But we encourage people to come. If you have people in Jackson, please have them come. We're going to have presentations by both the mayor's office, Ted Hennepin, who's been appointed as the overseeing of the plant in the interim period. And then we also are asking folks to, we need this to be fully funded. And so we're asking folks to still put pressure on the state. And so tweet Tate Reeves, Governor Tate Reeves, let them know that we want a fully funded. We want them to fully fund the rebuild for Jackson's water infrastructure. And then last, please donate water filters, water tests. You can go to Jackson People's Assembly or MSRRC.org. You can reach directly out to Mr. Figures. You can reach out to NAACP. You can reach out to One Voice. We're all in this together. We are all getting this out to our people. And we have already served over 94,000 folks, 94,000 families. Right now I'm sorry. I'm sorry here, y'all. I'm fading a little bit. I'm getting a little tired. But we have literally given out most of the water that has been donated. Actually, we've given out all the water that has been donated. We have a couple of donations that have come in this week. And so we're back to purchasing water to distribute on a day-to-day basis. And so those donations are important. And yes, we have the amazing water systems that the Source has provided. And we have about 3 other locations that are providing water boxes where people can go and fill up their waters. But we're talking about a city of over 150-something thousand people. And so those 4 locations aren't going to be enough to get people the water that they need in dire situations. So we need donations of water. We are still distributing water in areas where there's low water pressure and or where there's contaminated water or where there is a boil water notice. And so those 3 things are still happening.
Wow, thank you. Any other comments, either Mr. Taylor or the other panelists? And any last comments? I know for you, Rakia, it's late, late, late. So respect your time. And but any last thoughts or comments that any of you have and want to share with us? We plan on posting this on our social media platforms to get this information out to other folks who were unable to attend tonight. A number of people reached out to us and asked if it was being recorded. And so we definitely want to support y'all in the wide variety of ways that you've outlined. But would love to hear if you have any last thoughts or comments, and we'll let y'all go and do the things you need to do for the rest of the evening.
No, I would just say thank you. And I saw Nashombi also put it in the chat to say thank you as she's traveling. You know, the Rakia said it best. You know, at the end of the day, there's a lot of work to be done. You know, if you all could find it in your hearts to donate, please do so. The easiest way to donate is to give dollars, because folks have flexibility. You know, she shared with you the information for the Mississippi Rapid Response. Like I said, they've been doing incredible work. So please do that, because sometimes even with donating water directly, there's a lot of logistical things that has to happen. I do want to note there is water in the city of Jackson. So because you had a lot of folks that was like, we're going to donate water, we're going to bring it to you from California. I'm like, well, we got water in Jackson. If you gave the dollars, we could purchase that water to give, et cetera. So saying that to say, or sometimes we may be in a situation, not at this moment, but in other moments where you got more water than you can store, but you want to stipend the folks who were giving out water, like the folks with the Mississippi Rapid Response. You had plenty of folks donating their time, et cetera, as volunteers. And so things like that. So saying that to say, you know, if you could find it in your heart to donate those dollars, it'd be greatly appreciated and will allow us the flexibility to and just thank you again for the opportunity to be able to share with you all Mississippi and Jackson and what's going on. And just know, as Mr. Figures say, there is a thrill of hope. So appreciate the time.
And sorry, one last thing, if we can get access to drop some info into the chat, we can drop the links and everything for folks. I think it's preventing us from doing it, but thanks, y'all.
Okay, and we'll make sure everyone who's on the call and who is registered to get all of the websites, the social media links and all of that to you, so that we can contact you, connect with you, donate cash. I love that. Cash is king always. And just want to say again, Mr. Figures, thank you so much for always just stepping up so strongly and just connecting and partnering with us strategically in our efforts to learn more. We want to learn more. We want to be in the know. And most importantly, we want to be able to support the work that y'all are doing. Thank you to everyone who came this evening. We're just so grateful. Again, we'll be sending out information to you via email. So if you miss it, don't know how to save the chat, we will get that information to you. Everyone have a great evening, happy holidays, and God bless all of you. Thank you, Mr. Figures. I'll be seeing you about 4 times this year. So get ready to, we got 4 trips lined up. So get ready to see us along with kids and old folks. We can't wait to get back to Jackson. Take care, everyone. Have a great evening.
So
Good night,
long,
everybody.
Stay strong, and thank you all for showing up.
Thank you.